I moved in with my mom after her marriage of 25 years with my bio dad was ended. He was a manipulative asshole, but that's another story. Shortly after the divorce, my mom introduced me to her boyfriend at the time, Chris. Now, my mom worked as a correctional officer at the county jail. The boyfriend was a former inmate in for a DUI. That should have been the first red flag, but my mom was grieving a long marriage, and I didn't want to push the subject. Chris seemed to make her happy, and that was enough for me. I, bro, and sis all moved in with mom and Chris, and we seemed to get along. Okay, Chris and I bonded a bit over our love of video games, and all seemed well. That is until 2017. Due to Chris's prior DUI, he had to go in regularly for probationary checkups at the courthouse. One day he didn't return, and we got a little worried. We then received a phone call from him from Texas. Turns out when he arrived at the courthouse that day, he was jumped by the FBI. His family from Texas was implicated on a number of gang and drug-related crimes, and due to a situation where he was in a vehicle during a drug handoff, he was on the hook as well. He ended up agreeing to testify against his family members in exchange for a shorter sentence and allowed to be out of prison before the trial. My mom was distraught, and over the course of many phone calls over a year, they worked out their marriage plans when he returned. His store owner at the DQ he worked at allowed him to come back as well, back to his store manager position, soon after the drinking started. Now, obviously, because of his DUI, Chris was clearly no stranger to drinking. He began to drink more and more to the point where he was consuming half a 24-pack of beer a day. Chris was a mean drunk. He regularly started fights when wasted, and while they never got physical, he wasn't exactly kind with his words. My mom enabled his behavior for several years, saying the stress was getting to him from work and from the upcoming trial. Finally, after several years, my mom had enough. Chris came home extremely drunk one night, and my mom confronted him. She asked if he'd been drinking, and when he didn't deny it, she kicked him out. He went to live with a friend temporarily. The next morning, mom asked us to help gather a few of his essentials so that he didn't have to re-enter the home until he was sober. While we were gathering his things, we heard a knock at the front door. We opened it to find Betty, one of Chris's coworkers and someone I went to high school with. She told my mom she had something important to share. After sitting my mom down and telling her not to share where she got the info from, Betty told my mom about how Chris was cheating on my mom with Darla, how he regularly had Darla perform sexual acts in and around his workplace, how Betty had caught them, and how Chris told her that if she ever told my mom, he'd fire her. He was the store manager. And finally, how Darla was pregnant. My mom was angry. After the initial shock wore off, she told us to round up all of Chris's things and to dump it outside. We took everything of his out of the house and tossed it all in the alley behind our house. Chris had no reason or ability to return to the house it was rented, with only my mom on the paperwork, so no issues there. In the meantime, she called and confronted him. He confessed to the entire affair and that he was happy Darla was pregnant because that meant he'd finally have a child of his own. Mom refused to have more kids. We three were massive strains on her body. She likely wouldn't survive anymore. He refused to apologize for any of his actions. My mom arranged for him to collect his items from the alley with an officer present, and he left our lives. Now, my mom clearly wanted to dust her hands of him and move on. She was already quite emotional from the whole ordeal and wanted nothing more from him, but sis, bro, and I had other ideas. First, we called his workplace. DQ operates as an independently owned franchise, and the owner of this branch owns several branches in the area. He was also a good friend. We informed him of the sexual acts being performed on the premises, and he went the processes of getting Chris booted from his position and barred him from any of the branches in the area. Funnily, Betty got his position after he left and now runs a tight and clean ship. Chris no longer had a job or a place to live, and so went to live with Darla in a town about an hour away. We found out that he started working at another DQ in that town and informed the owner of that location of the situation. It took significantly longer due to there being no current indecent actions occurring there, but eventually he lost that job too. Soon after, Chris began driving around our neighborhood, seemingly stalking my mom and our family, probably because of his job loss. Now, Due to the whole situation in Texas, he never had his probation lifted for his DUI and thus still did not have a license. He never had to drive when he lived with us since work was local and we could drive him as needed. But here was clearly driving around by himself when he shouldn't be. We contacted the police and informed them about Darla's vehicle in our neighborhood and that we believe Chris was driving it without a license. We told them to pull over the vehicle next time they see it, as it would likely be seen driving again. Sure enough, a few weeks later, we were told that Chris indeed was pulled over and sent back to the local jail for driving without a license and while intoxicated. The police also did a search of the home he was staying at and found several guns at the premises. Since he was a felon, he was not legally allowed to have weaponry on the premises, meaning there was more jail time tacked on. By the time his jail time had finished, it was just in time for him to be sent back to incarceration in Texas for the trial. Chris's son was born while Chris was in prison. Darla evidently realized what an absolute ass Chris was and cut ties with him while he was in prison. During his prison time, Chris started sending tons of letters to my mom stating how sorry he was, pleading to take him back, and ranting about how it wasn't his fault, all in the same letter, mind you. Mom burnt every one of them. We moved on, moving out of state. Chris evidently got out of prison some years ago and now lives in Kansas, struggling and fighting child support, which Darla sued him for. Mom now has a new boyfriend who treats her right and cares a lot more than Chris ever did. Bro and sis moved on and out, and I still live with mom, assisting her with the newly purchased home that we've been renovating. Life's looking okay. I was reminded of this by a chat with a coworker about cheaters and thought to post it here for others to enjoy. Moving into the new house felt like stepping into an unknown world. Our parents, bound by their whirlwind romance, decided to merge our families. Jamie and I were thrown into the mix without much say. I remember the first day vividly, the awkward smiles and the forced introductions. Jamie, with her guarded eyes and half-hearted smile, seemed as wary as I was. We both had secret skeletons in our closets we weren't ready to share. Days turned into weeks, and our interactions were limited to polite exchanges. But beneath the surface, I sensed Jamie's struggle mirrored my own. Her eyes, always distant, hinted at a story untold. Mine, I'm sure, betrayed my own fears and regrets. The catalyst for change came unexpectedly. One night, our parents were out for a dinner date, and Jamie and I were left alone. I was in the kitchen, making a sandwich when I heard soft sobbing from the living room. There on the couch, Jamie sat curled up, tears streaming down her face. "Jamie, are you okay?" I asked, my voice soft. She looked up, startled, quickly wiping her tears away. "I'm fine," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "No, you're not," I insisted, sitting beside her. "You can talk to me." She hesitated, then sighed. "It's just ... everything. This new family, my past. It's all too much sometimes," I nodded, understanding completely. "I get it. I'm here if you want to talk." That night, Jamie opened up to me about her past. She spoke of a toxic relationship that left her broken and scared. The emotional scars were still fresh, and moving into a new family only added to her anxiety. In return, I shared my own story of failed relationship that ended in betrayal, leaving me distrustful and wary of new connections. Our shared vulnerability became the foundation of our bond. We spent more time together, finding comfort in each other's company. Movie nights, late night talks, and shared laughter became our refuge from the complexities of our blended family. One evening, as we were watching a movie, Jamie leaned her head on my shoulder. My heart raced, but I didn't move. It felt right, natural. Our relationship was evolving, crossing boundaries we hadn't anticipated. The night we first kissed, it felt like the world stopped. Every fear, every doubt melted away in that moment of pure connection. But our happiness was short-lived. Jamie discovered she was pregnant. The news hit us like a freight train. We were both terrified, unsure of what to do. Our parents were unaware of our relationship, and the thought of telling them seemed impossible. "We need to tell them," Jamie said one night, her voice trembling. "I know," I replied, my own fear mirroring hers, "but I don't know how." The confrontation was inevitable. Our parents were shocked, angry, and disappointed. The house that had started to feel like a home became a battleground. Amidst the chaos, Jamie and I stood together trying to find a way forward. But as the days passed, doubt crept into my mind. The weight of our situation, the judgment from our parents, the uncertainty of our future, it all became too much. One night, in a moment of weakness, I told Jamie I couldn't marry her. Her eyes widened, filled with hurt and betrayal. "Alex, what are you saying? I'm not ready for this," I said, my voice breaking. "I can't do this, Jamie." "I'm sorry," she stared at me, tears streaming down her face. "You're just going to leave me? Leave our child?" I couldn't look her in the eyes. "I'm sorry," I whispered before turning and walking away. The days that followed were the darkest of my life. Jamie, heartbroken and alone, faced her new reality with a strength I hadn't anticipated. She moved out, determined to raise our child on her own. I tried to bury my guilt and regret, but it haunted me every day. Jamie's resilience was awe-inspiring. She found a small apartment, juggled a job, and prepared for the baby's arrival. She built a new life, one filled with challenges, but also moments of joy and hope. Despite the hardships, she remained strong, her love for our child giving her the courage to keep going. Months passed, and I watched from a distance, my heart aching with regret. I realized I had made the biggest mistake of my life. Jamie had become the person I admired most, her strength and determination shining through every obstacle. One day I couldn't take it anymore. I went to her apartment, my heart pounding with fear and hope. She opened the door, her eyes wide with surprise. "Alex," she said, her voice wary. "Jamie, please," I begged. "I'm so sorry. I was a coward. I let fear control me and I hurt you. I want to make things right. I want to be here for you, for our child." She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of pain and hope. "You can't just walk back into our lives like nothing happened." "I know," I said, my voice earnest, "but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make it right. I love you, Jamie. I love our child. Please give me another chance." Jamie hesitated, then nodded slowly. "You have a lot to make up for, Alex, I know," I said, my heart lifting with hope. "And I will. I promised that rebuilding our relationship wasn't easy. Trust had been shattered, and it took time to mend. But with patience, love, and a shared commitment to our child, we found our way back to each other. The day our son was born was the happiest day of my life. Holding him in my arms, I felt a profound sense of love and responsibility. Jamie and I stood together, a family ready to face whatever challenges came our way. Our journey was far from perfect, but it was ours. We learned that love isn't about being perfect, it's about facing life's imperfections together. Jamie's strength and resilience inspired me every day, and I became the partner and father I was meant to be. In the end, our love story was one of redemption and second chances. We found our way through the darkness, guided by the light of love and the promise of a better future. And that, I realized, was the greatest secret of all.